This is the technique and the procedures for making steamed rice on the stovetop. I want to start with a pot that has a nice tight fitting lid. In today's recipe, I'm going to make 2 cups of rice that I'm going to start with by adding to a colander in a bowl and adding some water to do a little initial rinsing. This is going to take off some of the residual starch. It's going to help this rice to set up better in the cooking process. I put this in the colander and swirl it around a little bit just to kind of knock the grains into each other. And when I drain this out, you'll notice that the water is somewhat milky. I avoid doing this in the sink so that I don't have to worry about cross-contamination of any other bacteria that's in the sink that might splash on the rice. This rice is now put into the pot itself. Any rice that was stuck in the bowl, I'm going to rinse out with some water. And for this recipe and demonstration, I'm going to measure this water out. The amount of water for 2 cups of rice after it's been rinsed is 2.5 cups of water. Basically 25% above what your initial volume was. But as you're going to see, I really don't have to use a measuring cup for the rice or the water. The amount of water I want is 1 fingertip above the rice once it's settled in the bottom of the pot. For me, my fingertip is 1 inch in length. Next, I want to put a flame on high and start to bring this rice to a boil. I'll have a spoon that will stir this up to make sure that the rice and the water are evenly distributed, and then it's a matter of waiting for this to come to a true hard boil. There's a little bit of simmering and bubbles going on. I stir this up again, but that is not a true hard boil, and I need to capture that from the beginning. You can see now that we've come to a hard boil, so it's time to put the lid on. It is true that you can get to a boil sooner if you start with the lid on, but the risk of me boiling it over and making a mess on the stove are pretty great. Once I've got that initial boil, I'm going to turn that stove down to low. I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. Now, we have a power burner in class, the front right burner in most of your stoves. That is a more powerful burner with more BTUs. And you can see by the size of the flame, it would probably bring the rice to a boil much quicker than the flame that I used. However, this flame that's behind it is the proper flame you'd want to use for the simmering setting. So you can use the large flame to get the initial boil, but don't use it for the low simmer setting. This isn't shown in the video, but there is steam escaping that I was wiping away with my hands. We're halfway through the cooking process, and there's still steam that will escape, even though it's a tight-fitting lid. 5 minutes or 4 minutes left in the cooking process. There's not as much steam because the water's gone, but you can really smell that rice is cooking. At the end of 20 minutes, we're done. Now you may want to take and turn your stove off, and you might think it's time to check your rice, but do not lift the lid at this time. No. There's still steam inside that's going to continue cooking the rice. I set the timer again for 20 minutes, and this is going to be the rest stage, but there's still heat inside the pot, so it's going to steam. That burner that you were using is still hot. You wouldn't want to put your bare hand on it, so I like to slide the rice off onto another surface just to make sure there's no more carryover cooking beyond what I want. There's only about 4 minutes left, so we're getting close to the end of the 20-minute steam rest cycle. At the end of 20 minutes, it's time to lift the lid off and see how things turned out. This is our finished steamed rice. Sometimes you'll see little tunnels and pockets of steam that escaped. They were kind of hard to see, but they were there. This rice is pretty sticky, so you may need a little help digging it out from the pot. I'm glad that it didn't all come out at once, because that would mean that was kind of soupy. When I scrape this all out, I can see that the bottom of the rice pot has not burned, and because this is sticky rice, you'll see that we're able to pick up pieces, chunks, with chopsticks, that it binds together that way. Now to help this kind of move around and cool down some, I may spread it around with a wooden spoon, but I'm not stirring it too much because there's a lot of starch involved. It will become gummy, which is not what we're looking for. If I were going to eat that rice as is, I would serve it right away. But we want this rice to be cold for using in fried rice, and so we can spread it out on a sheet pan, increasing its surface area to help it cool down quickly. When you're making fried rice, oftentimes you're using the rice that was from the day before, but we're making rice on purpose for that. The yield of this recipe ends up being 6 cups of cooked rice. 2 cups of rice, only 2.5 cups of water, becomes 6 cups.